As an instrument-rated private pilot who recently got into aerobatic competition, I'm really excited about where home sims are at. That felt realistic to me. That is something I've never been able to do in a sim, is spin and feel like it really felt right. My computer expert buddy Matt is helping me out with this episode, and he's also working toward his private license.
We are somewhere over Lake Erie. What's happening? Having fun.
And we also lean on expertise from John, who's a pilot as well as a sim expert, who's built all my sim setups, including the first one that I had years ago that got me through the instrument rating. So that's a full slip. Let's see how it comes out. I do feel like the ailerons are talking to me, which is nice. So this new yoke with force feedback is very exciting, and there's one aspect of it that completely blew my mind. Okay, so 90 seconds of background context here. I've been working with John for quite a long time. He's a good buddy, and he's now a jet pilot, which is pretty impressive. He has been building these custom panels for a long time with the goal to emulate any aircraft that you want, totally custom. And in my case, I'm now flying this RV-14 with a very impressive panel that's got a lot of modern tech. And it's pretty exciting that this stuff is now available. The newest equipment from Real Sim Gear emulates the G3X Touch. I've also got the GTN 750 Navigator, the GFC 500 Autopilot. So it's really cool to be able to get this close to emulating the actual aircraft in an affordable home sim setup.
Yeah, this looks pretty good. If you can probably power back a little bit. One notch of flaps.
So stay tuned to the end if you want to see Matt land this thing. But this is doing a pretty good job emulating the actual airplane, which flies with a stick. Matt has some time in the airplane with me, but for this episode, we're going to be at his place testing this new equipment. And to be clear, this is not a paid promotion, other than having sent us this unit, which doesn't really fit with my setup. It's actually going to live at Matt's place, and we're probably going to do a giveaway for this thing after we're done evaluating it. The first impression is pretty impressive, watching how powerful the servos are while it does its self-test and calibration. The back of the unit is quite deep, and it's very heavy. Alright, so the first kind of interesting thing about this thing is it vibrates with engine RPM. So as I add power with the brakes on here, the feedback in the stick is changing, which is kind of fun. Does have more forces than I would think with no airspeed, but I'll forgive them that. Anyway, let's go. Power set, brakes are on. I like it. Brakes are off. And I never find ground ops in sims are good. This is the best set of pedals in the game as far as I'm concerned though, but I'm always having a hard time keeping it straight on the ground. Anyway, there's rotation speed. Yeah, so I can trim myself pretty quickly right to where I want to be with no stick force. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to check that in level flight though, because if that really works, that is what to me is the most valuable thing about if force feedback works, to have it be able to trim out stick force, especially for IFR flying. As of now, I don't find sims at all useful for hand flying because you can't trim, and that's so hard to hand fly when you don't have force, stick force. So you give myself some reference. First thing I want to do once I get to about 1,000 feet is do some slow flight maybe, and then a steep turn, and we'll try stalling it. And I guess for context, this is my friend Matt's setup. It fits nicely in his setup. Mine has a very small panel with the G3X and the GTN 750. Couldn't really get this to test on my setup because of the way my panel is. So we're doing it here. And this does require a bunch of work to set up. Maybe I'll get you to comment on that after I do the test flight. As of now, this thing is an early, is this like
pre-production?
Because is the Kickstarter going yet?
No, Kickstarter is not out yet.
So it's actually Indiegogo, and the campaign launched a few days ago while I was editing this. So yeah, it requires a bunch of back-end work to make this happen. Anyway, okay, so yeah, for this speed, there's force, but it's not a lot of force. Pretty good. Let's just get the power back and let's try slow flight. Yeah, so I can trim it, it's good. Stall horn a bit. Okay, so stall horn is honking. Yeah. I feel like the stick is talking to me, so that's kind of nice. I know I'm on the edge here. Control feel aside, another very important aspect of home sims that's getting really good these days is the buttonology of physical units that emulate actual hardware. Preparation for my initial instrument check ride required me to learn the GNS 430 GPS unit from Garmin, and Real Sim Gear has a very accurate actual physical unit that I had at home. It's a very simple system in terms of the back end, so most home sims have that worked out quite well in terms of the software. But recently I've done some training on the G1000 and I did find the FMS management didn't quite work the same on the sim. So this was my second home sim setup, which now lives in Dennis's actual hangar, where he's got a classroom set up to work with students. And we did find some bugs while trying to transition me through some training that ultimately I saw some challenges when I moved to the real airplane. That's a whole other story. But anyway, let's get back on board for the force feedback test and see how well it feels during a spin. And I just kind of got myself into a steep turn here. Something else I wanted to test. I don't even feel like I'm thinking about it. The forces are pretty good. I feel like the turn rate is a little high, but that's an X-plane thing, I guess.
How's the deflection back on the stick?
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm too far back. I got lots to go if I wanted to. That's accelerated stall, that felt good. I do feel like there's no way a 172 would be turning like this rate.
Not a chance.
We're not even going that fast, so that was a little weird, but I suppose that's X-plane. All right, reverse it. Yeah, I mean, the amount of force is taken, and I guess let's check. Yeah, so the vibration is changing with power even while flying. Not exactly realistic, I guess, but it's kind of cool. What I want to do now is just pretend I'm making an IFR scenario where I need to trim out my stick forces. So if I get myself kind of going this way, let's say I want to fly level with that amount of power, so let it accelerate for a second. So like cruising on 172, you're probably in the 2300 RPM range, 100 knots. So if I want to trim out the stick forces, that's pretty cool. That right there to me is the value of it for force feedback. I'm not super concerned about maneuvering feedback so much as getting rid of stick forces with trim, realistically, quickly, like as you would in a real plane. That's where I think sims fail, and I can't consistently hand fly for instrument practice with this type of equipment without that and feel like I'm getting any value. So that is pretty cool. I'm just going to try to spin it with this view here so I can see what I'm doing. Let's pull the power off, maintain altitude. So the stick forces should get heavier as I pull, which they are. So that's fairly good. Just maintain the attitude where the speed bleeds off. There's a stall horn. And back, yeah, that was pretty good. All the rudder in, and then recover. Yeah, that felt pretty good. That felt realistic to me. That is something I've never been able to do in a sim, is spin and feel like it really felt right. So kudos to X-Plane, I guess, for the flight model on that. But also, this is X-Plane 12?
Yeah.
Yeah, but also the force feedback made that feel pretty good. Oh, look at that, I'm on final. Let's see what landing this thing is like. Let me do one more stall here. I'm just gonna stall it here, pretend I wasn't paying attention. Let's just see if I can keep it straight with rudder. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, not disappointed. Some flaps, where's my flap switch? Good, speed is good. Yeah, so that's cool. Pitching with application of flaps, felt good. Trimmed it quickly. So that's good. Like, I mean, I'm trimming myself for final, 70-ish. I think that's where I want to be with that amount of flaps. Normally, you're kind of wrestling to get a sim to feel like it's in control, but the fact that I can trim out stick force, that's pretty cool. Yeah, just like, I don't know what the wind is today here, but just dial it in. Maybe a touch high.
Yeah,
actually, let's try slipping.
Looks a little steep. Oh yeah, there you go.
Got all the rudder in right now. So that's a full slip. Let's see how it comes out. I do feel like the ailerons are talking to me, which is nice. And I'll bring it out of the slip. Back to center line. Didn't really protect that nose wheel as much as I wanted to, but yeah, I mean, pretty cool. Pretty cool. So this thing is 800 USD.
800 USD.
So full disclaimer, I don't have any other experience with any of the other products on the market that have force feedback in a home sim scenario, but that felt pretty good. I think the only weird thing is that still having stick force on the ground, but again, I can forgive them that because it did change based on airspeed. There was a couple times there where I was just flying around like I would have without thinking, just instinctively trimming out stick forces, feeling what I thought was the right amount of force. It was talking to me based on my speed. To have this in a home sim, I've never seen anything like this outside of a level D multi-million-dollar airliner setup. That's my experience with force feedback. So I don't know anything in terms of the home sim market. I know there's another leader like Brunner, is that right? Brunner, which I wouldn't mind testing to compare, but that's kind of cool. So this is my buddy Matt's setup. My panel is pretty small, so it wouldn't have worked to test this without pulling it all off the desk and not having any of my hardware. Matt has these touchscreens which can be configured for anything from a G1000 to a 6-pack. Mine is really set up to match the RV14 with the G3X Touch, the GTN 750. I've even got the GFC 500 autopilot, and in a nice tight little package. I fly with a stick, so I wasn't interested in leaving space for a yoke in mine. So at my place, it was clear we weren't really gonna be able to test this properly. But with that in mind, it also required a lot of work for Matt to configure this. So having him do it at his place made more sense anyway. You wanna kind of address that?
Well, I think anyone that's, or in general, most pilots are probably not computer techies. In order to get the level of realism to do proper flight training, you need to set up the PC accordingly and all the peripherals, all the hardware and all the software to make it work. It takes a lot of configuration. So you can't just turn on the computer and say, I'm going to go flying today and train. It's getting better, it's getting easier, but there's still lots of variables at play here to make this work. So, example, if I do an alt tab here and show you what's running on the background, if you look in my other screen there, all those different applications are running with X-Plane to make this work right now, including the configuration software for the force feedback yoke and all the settings you can change on it. We have a lot of variables at play here, and when one of them isn't right, things just don't work well in your flight, and it gets in the way of training. So I think this is important to remember that yes, you can build all this at home and you can work with it, but it's going to take a lot of massaging of variables to make it work for you seamlessly, so you're not thinking about the technology, you're worrying about your training.
With that in mind though, this is pre-Kickstarter, so the goal would be that when it is done, maybe it is a quick set it and forget it.
Yep. Hopefully, I know the competitors to this that are already out in the marketplace, their software apparently is quite simple to configure. And I think the default settings are set up almost like you can just go and fly. My point is, it's not just the yoke software, it's everything else around it. Takes a bit of setup work and it takes ongoing maintenance. When there's an update to one of the applications, it might throw the other ones off that all work together.
So this channel is largely based on real flying content. I will continue to sprinkle in some sim flying stuff, but the next episode is about an actual emergency that I experienced with a friend of mine in her Mooney. And until the next one, keep your flight chops sharp.
1 mile final runway 26.
As promised, here's Matt's landing. Okay, just aim for those 1,000-foot markers. And this time, try to hold it off longer. Because what's happening is you're letting it hit in this attitude, and that's why it's bouncing. Okay, so power off, nose up a teeny bit, you're gonna hit. Nose up, and power off. Nose up, just a bit. Okay, well.
That was better.
But you're bouncing now. Anyway, you're so low energy that it worked out. And that's kind of how it would have gone, I think. The gear would have twanged a bit more, but man, you held heading, good landing.